things of that nature, 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 things of that nature.
And what's going on, everybody? Curtis Wilkerson and Andrew Ellis here with Inside Arkansas for the Pod of That Nature pregame show. Talking a little Arkansas and Auburn today. We've got the start of SEC play. How about that, Andrew? Arkansas has gotten off to a 2-1 start. Been some ups, been some downs. Auburn, I think pretty much the same could be said about them. But this is a game, at least on paper, that Arkansas has got every opportunity to go in there and compete in.
Yeah, I mean, it's played out about how I thought it would, where we see the Auburn game on the schedule preseason, and we're all like, oh, are they going to win at Auburn? And then, they lose against Oklahoma State, and you're like, all right, we definitely cannot pick them to beat Auburn. And then as the matchup gets closer, you start looking at it a little bit more. You start, maybe Arkansas is better here. Maybe Arkansas is better there. Maybe, and
so you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I'm being there, but I also am going into this with just red alert, because this looks like on paper the kind of game that Arkansas would really have a chance to win and then not win. And so I'm trying to put my guard up and kind of prepare for any possibility. But I'm getting to the point where it's Thursday now, and I'm really excited about this game, man. I've been thinking about this matchup a lot. Last week we didn't have a real matchup. We just had a game that was on the schedule that we needed to get through with. This is an actually intriguing, I don't want to say chess match, but there's things that I'm very curious about how these two teams are going to stack up against one another, and I think we're going to find out a lot about both teams on Saturday, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's a 2:30 kick on ESPN, right? I believe it's ESPN.
That's what we did. They had the four names in a hat and drew it out, and ESPN came out.
Yeah, man, you never know nowadays. It is going to kick off at 1:45-minute interval on a Saturday on one of several different potential channels. So that's where we're at. But no, man, I'm looking forward to it, and it's almost like the start of a new season, a clean slate, fresh chapter, whatever you want to call it. When you go to SEC play, and the players talked about that earlier in the week. Xavier Story said, "Hey, this is it's big boy ball, it's grown man ball now," and that's all true. And so I think you attack everything with a little bit different sense of urgency, whether you should be doing that or not, compared to out of conference games. It's just kind of the way it is. Never easy in the SEC, but like we talked about, there are a good handful of games that Arkansas has a real shot in league play this year, and this is definitely one of them. So we're going to talk about the things that we think need to happen for them to get it done, and we're going to start going back to just some must-win position battles. And you could say all of them if you wanted to, but the ones that really, really stand out to us where, I don't know, maybe we feel like Arkansas has an advantage, or they should, or areas they need to step up, whatever. What stands out to you when you look at this game in terms of position on position, hat on hat, if you will?
Well, so I'll tell you, I don't know if I necessarily would have had this matchup in my must-win position battles, but after hearing Trent Dilfer's comments on the radio, I guess it was yesterday, where he's talking to, I believe it was Cole Kubelik and Greg McElroy about Arkansas's team and just kind of what he sees. And he said he thinks Arkansas's receivers are a little bit susceptible to getting shut down in one-on-one matchups if you're aggressive with them at the line of scrimmage, if you press them. And he feels like his UAB team kind of showed the blueprint on how to contain Arkansas's offense. And so I think I'm looking at the Arkansas receivers versus Auburn's DBs, because we've heard a lot. I mean, you look on paper, you see that Auburn doesn't give up hardly anything in the run game. They give up a lot in the pass game. They're on paper, one of the worst pass defenses in the SEC. And Arkansas is coming off of a little bit of a shaky performance in the passing offense game. But we've seen Arkansas throw for 400 yards the two games before that. So Arkansas kind of seems like through air is the way to beat this Auburn defense. And Taylor Green's going to need to step up, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. But I'm looking at Arkansas's receivers, especially just with how Trent Dilfer kind of called them out publicly. Like, hey, I think that's something you can pick on those guys a little bit, and they don't win. He even said they have one guy who will win one-on-one matchups, and that's about it. Which, to his credit, it seemed like that kind of played out when he played Arkansas. And so I think it's up to those Arkansas receivers to kind of take that challenge personally, You're up against what is on paper one of the worst pass defenses in the SEC. Go attack them. Go really make that a strength. Don't just make it a thing of like, all right, well, we're going to count on our run game and maybe we can get a pass here and there. Like, go out there and beat those DBs so that you're harder to defend. It opens up that run game, and so my first matchup, I'm kind of looking at the Arkansas receivers versus the DBs.
Yeah, that's a really good call. I had not heard that stuff on the radio from Trent Dilfer. That's interesting. I have to go back and listen to that. But I mean, he's just kind of saying the quiet part out loud. It's been Andrew Armstrong's world, and the rest of the competition's been living in it. But then after that, they've got options. They've got guys we thought were primed for a breakout. Dudes you feel comfortable with, and we just haven't seen it on a consistent basis through 3 games. And then you think about it, it's a lot of the same guys from last season where the problem was winning one-on-one matchups and getting separation and doing so consistently. So that's definitely an area that they're going to have to work on. And yeah, you're right. I was looking into that Auburn secondary, and it has struggled. And I know they've had some injuries back there. I think maybe they're getting a guy back this week, but it's a young group too, is the other part of it. A lot of 18, 19-year-olds in that secondary. They're always going to be talented at Auburn, but maybe not the most experienced group that Arkansas is going to face. I'm going to go with shocker, Arkansas's defensive line against Auburn's offensive line for all the reasons we already know. So there's no need in really diving into it too far. Arkansas has been pretty good stopping the run. But they have just not been able to get a pass rush. And I'm not talking about it being inconsistent. I'm talking about it being non-existent. They've got 5 sacks this season through 3 games. 4 of them came against UAPB. So 1 in the last couple games combined. Quarterbacks have just been way too comfortable. And when you're way too comfortable and you got time to pick your spots and time for your receivers to get open, quarterbacks are going to complete passes. They're going to make plays. And Alan Bowman did that in the second half against Arkansas and in overtime. And then Jacob Zeno, I thought he looked great, against Arkansas, and he had nothing to worry about. So if you look at an area that the Razorbacks really need to pick it up, it's going to be right there. I don't care who it is, but you have to get pressure on Hank Brown. We're talking about a redshirt freshman quarterback making his second career start, his first SEC game. You cannot allow him to sit back there with a clean jersey and a clean pocket and make his progressions and have it be a 7-on-7 situation out there. Got to get that dude on the ground. I say defensive line because I think that's where it starts. But I do anticipate Travis Williams is going to get pretty creative in terms of where he's bringing pressure from and maybe taking some risks that I say he normally wouldn't. He's usually pretty aggressive, but taking some risks and bringing pressure from different areas to try to just force the issue a little bit. You have to.
I'm glad you went this direction because I actually even had written down Arkansas's DBs at first, where I was like, Arkansas's got a bunch of questions in the secondary. We now know that Jalen Braxton is out, which, by the way, Curtis, can we agree that the SEC injury report thing, how it releases on a Wednesday night, that's electric? That was awesome.
That's
7
time,
p.m.
man.
We're all just like, oh, just seeing whatever. I like the
and a couple surprises on it too. I mean, I anticipated that Braxton would at least be, on the questionable or probable after hearing Sam. You see that Posca's out, which whatever, but I didn't know he was even injured. Like you see some of those things, you're like, whoa.
Yeah. It was interesting to see what they did with Nichols because Nichols went out of the game the other day and you're kind of like, oh, what are they going to do with him? Is he going to be probable, doubtful? And he's probable. So you feel pretty good. But yeah, if we had recorded this yesterday, I would have definitely not expected Jalen Braxton to be out. So thank God we waited to Thursday. Which, I don't know why I said that. We were never planning not to, but at first I kind of was looking at Arkansas's DBs because, and especially now knowing that Jalen Braxton's out, you're like, all right, that's maybe the weak spot, or at least it was last week. They got a little bit diced up in the secondary, but I agree that I think it does kind of start up front. And I think that matchup is just more important. Obviously you have to be able to stay in front of receivers at any level. But if your defensive line is getting that constant penetration and that push, and Auburn's not able to really run the ball, it makes it a lot easier on you as a defensive back unit. And so I do think that I would say more of the pressure, no pun intended, more of the pressure is on the D-line, not coming from the D-line. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of where it starts on the Arkansas defensive side. But I do think that secondary, they're going to have their hands full. I think receiver is kind of one of the strengths of Auburn's team. And Hank Brown, again, we don't really know. We've only seen him play 1 game. We don't know how he's going to hold up in this environment. But it seemed like the receivers really enjoyed catching the ball from Hank Brown. Like, it seemed like that he's maybe their key to unlocking a higher ceiling to their offense that Peyton Thorne wasn't exactly able to. And so we'll see how that matchup shakes out. But Curtis, I got to go back to the other side of the ball. I think Arkansas's offensive line against this Auburn front is a big one to keep our eyes on here, because there's two questions that we've got to ask ourselves. One, Arkansas is one of the most potent run games in the country, and they're going up against a rush defense that allows double-digit yards per game, 97 yards per game. Which side is going to impose their will more? Is it going to be closer to Arkansas's 250 a game, or is it going to be closer to that 97 per game? I think that's a big question mark for me in this game, because if you tell me that Arkansas is going to be able to run the ball, I can easily get it behind Arkansas winning. But if Arkansas is not going to be able to run the ball consistently, and it's, like I said, closer to that 120 rushing yards as a team mark, I don't know how they're going to be able to consistently string together drives, and I don't know how they're going to avoid this Auburn defensive line from getting after the quarterback on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, stuff like that. And so I think it's up to this Arkansas offensive line to kind of assert themselves right away. And I think you don't have to be gashing them. You don't have to have 250 yards of rushing, but you've got to be able to get something going on the ground. Got to have that as part of what you got going on, and just to kind of keep them off balance. You don't want to be in predictable situations where they know you're running or know you're passing, whatever the case may be. And so I think it's key for this Arkansas offense to stay on schedule. And so offensive line, this is really probably the biggest test that they've faced so far this year. I don't think Oklahoma State's defensive front is necessarily a daunting one, especially with their best guy out, how he was in week 2. And so, yeah, I'm very interested to see like what we've got in this Arkansas offensive line. Pass protection has been a little bit more shaky than their, run lanes. I think they've been pretty good at consistently getting a push in the run game. I'm interested to see if they're able to do both of those things in this matchup.
Yeah, Jaquindon Jackson, he's usually not meeting first contact until he's in the second level. And that's a credit to the offensive line for the gaps that they've been putting together for him. And obviously he hits the hole extremely hard. Wonder how he responds when he's having to shed a tackle, at the line of scrimmage. Those things are coming. I'm wondering about, obviously I think they're going to probably put a pretty big emphasis on trying to contain Taylon Green's legs. And so then it's twofold, right? Because a lot of times he's just escaping and making plays, but I wonder how much they dial up for him in terms of design runs and things like that. It'll be interesting. But yeah, a lot of things about that offensive line that I like. Some things I'm concerned about. I'm with you, man. I'm really interested to see how it translates to SEC play and some guys individually that I want to talk about. And before we move on, it's not really a position battle thing, but I don't know where else it would fit in. But obviously we know that tackling has to get better. We might as well put that out there, because I know people are going to be in the comments like, hey, A, B, and C doesn't matter if they don't wrap up or whatever. It's been tough. I mean, they 11 missed tackles in this game against UAB. I think they had 13 against UAPB. It's crazy. The best competition they played was the best tackling they did, but they were just really sloppy in that game last weekend. That's uncharacteristic for this team or this defense under Travis Williams. But tackling high, going for strips, ripping helmets off. We talked about all that stuff. Got to clean it up. Auburn's going to be better. Way more athletic and skilled than any other team that they've faced. And so, Jarquez Hunter, you're going to have to wrap that dude up. You can't just run at his shoulders and try to strip him and expect that to work out for you. So even though they do fumble the football a lot, challenges issued to some key players for the Razorbacks. Guys, again, it's not this guy's been terrible, he's got to be better. But, dudes who we think might have a matchup, in their favor, or guys who Arkansas just flat out need to be good in this game. A third-time challenge sent out to Landon Jackson, I think. We're just going to continue to do this. And he was better against UAB. I think we both agree with that. He was more disruptive, really good in the run game. He didn't get a sack, but he got a couple pressures, got his hands on some passes, including the one that wound up being intercepted to seal the game there at the end. So he was better, but now it's on to SEC play. He's your all-SEC guy. And the biggest question mark on your defense is about getting a pass rush, which is what he does by trade. So in the biggest moment, I think it's time for him to step up and finally get on the board in that sack column. He needs to be a menace, a problem that Auburn can't solve.
Well, you want to know who my first challenge is going out to, Curtis?
Yes.
Nico Davier. The
There
Mall
we
Mail
go.
boy. I'm sticking on the D line. I actually was thinking about this because I even thought about this for a second. I was like, Landon Jackson, let's just challenge him again. But then I was like, you know what? It's too easy. It's too easy. We gotta, the Auburn is going to be prepared for this Landon Jackson thing. They know who he is. Like he's still going to be getting plenty of attention. I think that we also kind of expect that he's going to be pretty good. Like I don't know if he needs the challenge, although he hasn't had a sack yet this year.
I was going to say, I don't know if I expect that or not.
Yeah, no. I thought that he played better last weekend, and just like when it's SEC play, like I'm counting on Arkansas's best players to show up. And so I think it almost like goes without saying that Landon Jackson has to be better than he's been this year. But Nico Davier, I feel like, is a big one where we saw him flash in week 1, and we saw like him kind of step forward in that position battle with Anton Junkaj, who, to say that he's provided Arkansas with nothing might be an understatement. And it doesn't seem like any pass rushing prowess is going to be coming from Junkaj anytime soon. And so I do feel like Davier needs to be the guy that steps up on the edge there. Quincy Rhodes is still young. I mean, he's still getting in there a little bit, played like 5 or 6 snaps against UAB, but it seems like if Arkansas is going to get a sack from a defensive end not named Landon Jackson, it would come from Nico Davier. And I think it'd be about a nice time to make that happen. And again, we saw him flash a little bit in week 1. It seems like he's taken the appropriate strides throughout his career. He's been kind of working to get to this point. He's now like a solidified, bona fide starter there on the defensive end. I think it's time for him to kind of take that step and be a problem for SEC offenses rather than just a young player that we're somewhat promised by and we're intrigued by. Like it's time for him to take that step and be a dude. And so I'd like to see that start this weekend. So Nico Davier is who I'm issuing my first challenge to. And my second challenge, Curtis, we're going back to the offense. I'm going Isaiah Satania. I really thought about going Tyrone Broden here, but I'm not saying I'm he can't play and he's never going to be successful, but I'm done trying to challenge and expect Tyrone Broden to be like the guy that we thought he was going to be. I've kind of moved on a little bit. Satania is a guy that has been a part of our challenges before. I know we challenged Bobby Petrino going into the Oklahoma State game to get him involved. I think Arkansas needs another receiver to kind of step up and be a consistent target. I believe Satania caught the only 2 passes that didn't go to Andrew Armstrong last week, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, his only other completion was to a running back. You're right.
Yeah, and so I think it's Arkansas's kind of made a concerted effort to try and get him involved. I'm glad that they did the jet sweep thing just to like see it, just to be like, all right, that's a thing that we can do with something you put on tape. So I look forward to seeing like if there's a creative way they can get Isaiah Satania involved. But I'll be honest with you, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about Satania, we talk about him like he's this gadget guy that you got to like come up with all these weird things. On 3rd and 7, he can just run an in-breaking route and get open. It's like I think he can just be an actual part of the offense that you can count on and rely on and just run routes. He doesn't have to be some kind of weird, how do we get him the ball? It's like, just call a pass play and let him get open. You know what I mean? Like I think it sometimes is that simple. And so I hope he's on the field a little bit more, like a higher percentage, because I know Tyrone Broden, speaking of him, he's on the field like every play, like literally every play. And so I would like to see maybe Satania be on the field damn near every play. See if they can get him going a little bit. I think he has a lot of upside. We've talked about him a ton, but I would love to see him kind of assert himself this week as that number 2 receiver because Andrew Armstrong needs a running mate.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's got to be somebody, and I don't think there's necessarily a better option out there than Isaiah Satania. So I'm with you on that one. I'm going to issue a challenge to Taylon Green. I think he needs to flip the narrative. I think this is a really important game for him. And no, I'm not in the camp of, now if he ain't great against Auburn, you got to move to Singleton. No, I don't feel that way at all. But he really, for the first time, to the eyes of the fan base, kind of showed the things that got him benched at Boise State. And that's not a path you want to head down. Everything was trending up. And then that was like falling off a cliff. And this last game was just really bad. And it's not knocking the guy. He just wasn't good at all. So they really need him to be better. Obviously, if you're going to win games, you got to get more out of your quarterback. Love what he does with his legs. I don't think he's going to get away with some of the things he does with his legs against SEC defenses. So being smart and picking his spots to do that, I think will be important. So some awareness things there. And then, it's not all about just ball placement with him, even though that needs to improve. You complete 42% of your passes. that needs to be better. Even the ones he completes, sometimes he throws absolute dimes, no doubt about it. But there are other times where you leave a lot of yards after catch on the table because you're behind a guy or you're low or whatever. But it's not just about ball placement to me so much as decision making. And what I was seeing against UAB, and I'm not a quarterback whisperer, I don't know, but he was hesitant to make throws that were there early. And I don't know if it's because he's not seeing it, what he needs to see, or if he's not making the appropriate reads, or if he's not trusting his arm to get the ball in there. I don't know what it is, but there were a lot of opportunities where he could have let that thing fly with his receivers who had some separation, and you just got to put it in there. I want him to play with confidence and freedom. Like the last thing you want is for him to get the yips and just think, yeah, I don't know, I better run. That's not what you want. He really is the epitome of a dual threat quarterback. And you want him to play with confidence and command of the offense. I anticipate that he's going to be a lot better in this game. I think that what we saw, last weekend against UAB is that's kind of the rock bottom for the Taylor Green trajectory of how good he can be versus how sometimes bad he can be. I think we're going to get more good than bad out of him. So I expect him to be better. But it's those little things when it comes to decision making, when to throw, seeing your guys, when to run, when to stay in the pocket, and trust your guys to run their routes and make plays. That's what I really want to see from him. And then center, whoever it is. When they had Addison Nichols in there, it was a struggle, frankly. So in terms of just getting clean snaps off, and he had a rough go of it, there at Oklahoma State, and hopefully he's healthy and able to play, but he was struggling before he was injured. And then now you're going to bring him in, probably not 100%, off a high ankle sprain where he's trying to get leverage against SEC defenses. That makes me nervous. Amari Wiggins was kind of thrown to the fire there, but he had some struggles as well against obviously a far less talented UAB team, to the point where Sam Pittman was saying, hey, we're going to throw, Josh Street in there, whoever else. We're just going to see if we can create some competition for maybe that backup center spot. That's the one guy who touches the ball every play besides the quarterback. So they need to get some things figured out there. Whoever it is, hope to see a good performance from them.
Were you talking about team captain Josh Street?
I was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Good for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think center, it's going to be very interesting to see like just how healthy Nichols is. Knock on wood, you hope that he's just back to normal. He's got his cortisone, his whatever, and he's ready to roll that ankle. He's fine. But I am very intrigued by what's going to happen with this Taylor Green situation, because I agree with you. Like, it's weird because I don't want to like pat ourselves on the back too much, but Curtis, I really feel like we've been on the right side of history with this a lot, where like all off season we measured it and we were like, all right, we don't think Arkansas has like this dynamic, like this quarterback that's going to change the entire trajectory of the program. But we also don't think they have a bum like the guy who got benched at Boise State. Like we saw there was a little bit more than that there. But I feel like we did a good job of covering like the full aspect of what could happen here. And we've really, through 3 weeks, we've seen literally all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the great, the everything. But I do wonder, going after the UAPB game, there was that chatter of, well, Singleton and, this guy actually, his mechanics are better, blah, blah, blah. And then it shut up real quick against Oklahoma State. I'm wondering if this is going to be an opportunity for Taylor Green to at least shut it up real quick. And I'm sure it's going to prop back up later in the year because the backup quarterback is always the most popular player on the team. But I wonder what he has to do in this game to kind of ease all of that tension and just go ahead and end that conversation right then and there. And again, like it's never really going to end because people are always going to want to nitpick. But I feel like he could do a lot in terms of building trust with this fan base, building trust with himself. Because I think the coaches do believe in him. They have not wavered on their support of him being the starting quarterback or what they think he's capable of. And so I'm interested to see how he comes out and plays. I do think he's the type of guy that rises to the occasion and kind of plays best whenever his back's against the wall, but we'll see. Maybe he's just a road warrior. He looked great against Oklahoma State. We'll see if that's how it plays out here. But I think it's going to be very interesting. And really, he just got to take care of the football because I think this matchup is close enough to where, he's going to miss throws and we understand that's going to happen. But what Arkansas can't really overcome in a matchup this close is, him being erratic and turning the ball over, whether it's fumbles from the snaps of the center or throwing the ball into traffic. And really, he's only had the one actual interception. The other was hit from him. But no, yeah, I'm almost nervous for Talon myself.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that. The biggest thing in this entire game for me is that Talon Green needs to be the better quarterback than Hank Brown. And he is, no question about it, but he needs to be that on Saturday. And that means, obviously, he has to improve his performance. His receivers have to catch the football if they're thrown to him. But also, like, you can't make life easy on Hank Brown. If you get to the end of the game and it's very clear and very obvious that Talon Green was the better quarterback, Arkansas wins, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I have one more challenge, by the way. You're not going to believe this one. I'm challenging Devin Bale. Devin, you haven't gotten to play a ton this year because I don't think Arkansas punted against UAB, did they?
No, they did not.
They didn't punt against UAPB. They just really don't like punting against the schools that start with UA, for whatever reason. But I think Devin Bale is going to be. He had an awesome game against Oklahoma State. He had 3 really good punts. I think there's a chance where, like, when you're talking about a matchup that we think is pretty close on paper, there's room there for the punter to kind of change this game a little bit, to put Arkansas in a good position. I think special teams, when you have teams that are this evenly matched, I think special teams matters a good bit. We'll see what Arkansas, they stick with Kyle Ramsey in the kicking situation. He did a pretty good job last week. But I think Devin Bale is going to have a chance to boot some big ones that are going to flip the field and change this game a little bit.
I like that. I like that a lot. I've got a few quick ones, just kind of open-ended in the secondary, I guess. Obviously, now that we know Braxton's out for this game, the same challenges issued to the corners, which I assume will be Cuddy Robinson and Jaheim Singletary, who honestly played well, I thought, in the game against UAB. So just carrying that over. Braxton is just so good, and so it's a hit when you don't have him. But those guys were able to step up and do well against UAB, and so just continuing that success. And then, the nickel spot. I mean, Arkansas needs Nico Slaughter to be better. I mean, he's gotten picked on the last couple games there. Teams have identified, a weakness there in the Arkansas defense, and either he's got to be better, and obviously I think he's talented enough to do so, or they've got to come up with some answers there. And Sam Pittman even talked about it on the teleconference yesterday, where they feel, confident in a Tevis Metcalf behind him, and they've got something ready for. Can you believe this? Larry Worth. Hello, there he is. And we saw a little bit more of him. I think he played like 20 snaps or something against UAB. But I hope that the answer is as simple as Nico just getting settled in and getting comfortable and starting to ball out a little bit. But if not, being able to turn to some of those other guys. We talked about trusting your depth. Well, those are 2 dudes we haven't really seen that much out of in the course of the first 3 weeks of the season. But you got to have some answers there because, man, oh man, that was pretty glaring, I think, the last couple of weeks.
You know how you always say before we do these challenges, you always say, well, it's not really about people who've been struggling that need to step up. This is the exception.
This is
where you're challenging someone who's been struggling and needs to step up. But I agree 100%.
And I'm interested if he was bad, I'll say this. If I thought he was just bad, I wouldn't even waste my time. Like I wouldn't spend all my time a couple years ago challenging Simeon Blair. I would disrespect.
I was literally just about to say, you wouldn't have been challenging Simeon Blair, would you? Goodness gracious.
I love it. But also, I mean, like we challenged, I think a couple weeks ago, Bobby Petrino, like, hey, get your boy Satania involved early. I mean, I think a challenge for Travis Williams is warranted here. Don't get got again, because that was the first time since he's been at Arkansas that I felt he had a defense that was not prepared against UAB. And I know there were a lot of circumstances that went into that. We've heard him talk about it all. Obviously he had a child, so he was in and out. So it was kind of a weird week from that standpoint. They had dudes hurt. They weren't physical in practice, whatever. But especially when you're playing your alma mater, you just had the performance that you had with your defense. I know he takes a lot of pride in what's going on there. I would expect them to be over prepared. And I think he also understands the key to the game is whether or not he can get his defense to make life uncomfortable for Hank Brown. I think this is a really big opportunity to kind of reestablish the swagger I felt like that defense had the first couple weeks, and hopefully they get back to that.
I think I might have to challenge Sam Pittman going off of that, though. Just don't do anything stupid that like would give guys like us ammo to talk about your job in a big picture context. I mean, because when you think about like what could happen in this game, what could go wrong, what could go right, I think we all kind of in the back of our mind know that you're at Auburn, so there's could be something weird with the refs, or there could just be like some weird a timeout that was taken that wasn't supposed to be, or a challenge that was issued that wasn't supposed to be, or just some weird decision, weird 2-minute drill that goes awry. You can kind of just see it happening. That's what Arkansas just simply cannot afford to have happen in this game. You cannot lose a one-score game in that type of fashion where there's decisions that fans get to point to and be like, that's why you lost. And so Sam Pittman, who knows what the rest of this era holds? Who knows what the rest of this year holds? But you got a very good opportunity here to shut up some of the chatter, the noise around the program, and build some confidence. Get this fan base back on your side, because I'll just be honest with you, they're not on your side. Like, they're not. I mean, we've been trying all week to get people like, hey, do y'all care about this game? And literally no one has been like, yes, I do care about the game. Nobody. Like, people are telling us they're arguing why they shouldn't have to care about this game. They're really not into it. And look, it's not all on Sam Pittman, but I do think that like this week is kind of a week where like the vultures are out, and I know you've sensed this too, Curtis. The people that really hate Sam Pittman and really have been kind of almost cheering for the downfall of Arkansas football, they see this as the opportunity to kind of be like, see. And so Sam Pittman, just know that, and don't do anything stupid. We can't have any weird stuff. Just like go out there and like, let's just see if your team is better, but just put them in a position to where you're not a factor. There's not a whole, how are we going to handle this 2-minute situation? Are we calling timeout here? Are we going to go for it on 4th down? Like, just go out there and play, and let's see what happens.
It's such a tough position to be in. Which, I mean, it's kind of self-created though, in fairness, but like in a vacuum, if Arkansas opened SEC play at Auburn and lost, like played a competitive game and lost, or lost a 1-score game, if you just look at that one result, it's like, well, what do you want? Like, it would have been cool if they won, but that's kind of the expected outcome, I think. But everything is so big picture now, which is where this is at. And kind of like you were talking about, like the vultures are out, to where it's just so amplified. And we've talked about it. Like, you got to play the game that's right in front of you. But gosh, man, you're right. Like a win here, I think it would kind of shut people up, but it would also kind of help flip that narrative that's growing. Like, oh man, things haven't really changed, but my goodness, dude, they could go play really well, and lose a nail biter or get screwed by the officials or whatever. And it's going to be unbearable for the man going in the next week. So let's go to bold predictions for this game, Andrew. And it's been interesting to see, like, some of them were just, way off the wall, but these are bold predictions. So we're trying to, test the boundaries a little bit. And it's been interesting how close we've been on some of these. I'll give one first. I got a handful here. I think that Arkansas is going to get 3 or more sacks in this game. I think only one of them is going to come from the defensive line.
Well, Curtis, that's honestly, that's pretty similar to what I have.
I like that.
I was gonna say Arkansas is gonna get at least 2 well-timed sacks. I still think pressure is going to be an issue for Arkansas. Like, I don't think they're consistently their D-line alone, but I do think Arkansas is going to get creative a little bit. Yeah. And I think there's going to be at least twice where Arkansas just out of nowhere has a really big sack, whether it's like
Jaden Johnson out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Like where they just come up with a random one. Yeah. Brad Spence comes out and you're just like, oh, wow, like a huge one. I do think Arkansas is going to get creative, and I think it is going to really change the game whenever they're able to hit home in the backfield. But I don't know they're going to be able to get consistent pressure. So I think it's going to have to come from other spots. So I actually like it. Kind of is perfect that you said not the D line. And so we kind of combined for that one there.
I like it. Well, do you have more? If you have more, go ahead. I got a few.
No, I've got more. I've also got a random one that I don't feel great about, but I'm kind of willing it into existence. I think Braylon Russell is going to play meaningful snaps for the Arkansas Razorbacks this weekend. I think that Jaquinton Jackson has been obviously a workhorse. He might be the best running back in the SEC. Like, he's having that awesome of a year. And we just talked yesterday about how we wonder, like, he's the guy. And so we wonder, like, what the ceiling is, what he can accomplish long term. But realistically speaking, I just feel like Arkansas needs other guys to step up and be able to just carry the ball here and there. And so I'm not expecting Braylon Russell to get 15 touches. But I do think Arkansas is going to rely on more than just Jaquin Jackson here. We saw Braylon for a play last week. We saw him week 1. We'll see if R-Dub comes back to life at any point. But
I noticed that Dominion was not on that injury report anywhere. Like not available, not out, not probable. He just wasn't on it. So that I thought that was telling. But yeah.
Which is interesting but then Pittman's also said like he needs to practice, and so we'll see if he's back at practice. But I wouldn't be surprised if R-Dub makes a return this weekend. But I think Braylon Russell is going to get actual meaningful snaps, whether it's at the goal line or not. Like I think he's going to get some real snaps, and I'll be interested to see what he has to do with it. Because I mean, we challenged him last week to make the most of his snaps, and he made the most of his snap. But yeah, I think Arkansas is going to need another running back to just be able to carry the ball. And I like Rodney Hill, and I think they're going to continue to use him, especially in the passing game. But I do think they're going to need a big guy that they can just turn around. All right, Jaquin needs a break. Here, just take the ball and get 4 yards here. And honestly, Jaquin likes to limp off to the sideline with a fake injury. And so I think there's always room for another running back to step in. And so, but I think Braylon Russell, we are going to see him, and I think fans will like that.
I like it. I like it a lot. Wow, I feel like I kind of got pretty bold on some of these. I have no reason to believe what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, just because it's almost so obvious that it's going to go the other direction. Andrew Armstrong's not going to lead Arkansas in receiving in this game.
I like that a lot.
It's going to be somebody else. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's going to be somebody else. That's all I
get that. I mean, if you're Auburn and you're like breaking down Arkansas, I'm not saying you need to be like doubling Andrew Armstrong every play, but I don't know how you let that guy beat you.
Right. And so hopefully that's a good thing. I mean, like hopefully that means Satania or Broden or whoever, steps up and has 5 for 75 or whatever. And it's not like Andrew Armstrong kind of has a rough one or gets shut down. Then you got 4 guys who have 3 catches for 25 yards or whatever. So hopefully, maybe it'll be Luke Has. How about that?
I mean,
that'd be fun. That'd be a neat.
It certainly would be nice, but man.
I've got a couple bold ones. One on actually, I don't know if it would be one on offense and one on defense. So just a couple bold ones in particular. I'm going to give you one first, and I'll let you go, and I'll give my last one. I don't think either team's going to gain more than 400 yards in this game. And Arkansas is averaging 587 yards per game, and Auburn's averaging 472 yards per game. But you mentioned it, I think, on the show yesterday, where you could see this kind of turn into maybe a little bit of a slugfest, and that wouldn't necessarily surprise me. And I think even though they've got their holes, both teams, that it's going to be the best defense either team has faced. And there's just something about the start of SEC play. I could see this game kind of sputtering out of the gates and picking up late. I don't think either team's going to get 400 yards of offense in this game.
Curtis, we keep doing this thing where we're like kind of in lockstep. Like you make a point that kind of perfectly leads me to my next thing.
Good.
I think that 2 things happen on Saturday, Curtis.
Okay.
One, Jaquin Jackson is held below 100 yards rushing for the first time all year.
Okay.
And the second one is Arkansas still wins regardless.
Let's go.
I think that it's going to be a game where I don't think Arkansas is going to have 250 rushing yards. I don't think they might not even run for 200 yards as a team. I think Taylon's going to have his 50, 60, and Jaquin's going to have 75, 80, and we'll see if they're able to generate a few with those other guys. But I do think Arkansas is going to, like you said, it's not going to be a bunch of explosive yardage, just 500 yards. But I do think Arkansas is going to have to put together 2-3 long, legitimate scoring drives. And I think this is going to be a game more in that 24-20 type of range, like you said. And so I think Arkansas is going to have their star running back held below 100 for the first time all year. But I don't think it's going to disqualify them from winning the game.
I like that. Find a way. Find a way, whatever it takes. The last one that I had, and this is maybe even more bold than it sounds, I think there are going to be 0 fumbles in this game. There have been 16 fumbles, 7 of which have been lost between the 2 teams who've played 3 games each. So I think there's going to be 0 fumbles in this football game, but both teams throw an interception.
Now, just to be clear, you're saying there won't be any fumbles, period. Like whether they're lost or recovered?
No fumbles.
Ball's not touching the ground other than incompletion.
Ball security at a premium. We've been working on it in practice now.
I mean, that is nice. But you think both teams throw a pick, right?
But both teams throw a pick.
Either one throw 2?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
We won't clarify. Like if it
No.
ends up being just one, you got it right. But just
Yeah.
just wanted to know deep down.
Yeah. This strikes me as a, one tutty, one interception type of game for Taylon Green and a one tutty, 2 interception kind of game for Hank Brown.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, look, I'm very interested in the Hank Brown aspect here. Curtis, you've seen his line. I'm sure a lot of these fans listening have heard or have seen what his numbers were last week. What do you think his PFF grade was for that game, of which he threw 4 touchdowns and all that?
Since you brought it up, I'm going to say maybe not as good as I thought it would be.
It's a 70.
Okay.
Just a quick little 71.
Was Taylon Green better?
I mean, technically, yeah. They said last week Taylon Green was like a freaking 84 or something like that.
Yeah, that was
which that included the run game. But I think that's interesting because, and this is just one again, like PFF. I'm not saying they're like the end all be all, but just I know how they do their grading, and it's basically like if it starts at 60, and if you make a pretty good throw, they give you a small increment. If you make a really good throw, they give you a whatever. So that tells me that they grade him on a throw by throw basis. They don't think he made any throws that were like that crazy. And I know he had a couple. I think he hit a receiver over the top for a pretty solid like deep ball. And I think he made a couple I think they had him as one quote unquote big time throw. But it doesn't seem like he was rattling off a bunch of super difficult throws into tight windows. And so I think there's still a lot to be determined here with this Hank Brown kid, which I'm not breaking any news here. I mean, his only start's been against New Mexico. I don't even know if Arkansas is necessarily going to be the team that exposes whatever it is that is going on with Hank Brown. But
right.
I definitely don't think Arkansas, I can't just buy that it's as simple as like, hey, we benched the 6th-year senior, and now we've got this little kid starting, and everything's great. Like, I don't know if I can buy that. But I do think there's a path to like Arkansas not being the team to really like make them pay for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think maybe that's not the right way to phrase it. I wonder what the leash is for him. Like they bench Peyton Thorne, but like how committed are they to just riding or dying with Hank Brown? Like it's one thing against New Mexico, but if you get into an SEC game and you're at home again, you already lost to Cal at home, and if he's really scuffling and missing his reads or whatever, he just looks uncomfortable. And it's halftime and Arkansas is up by 2 scores or something. I wonder how committed they are to just riding with him the entire game. Would be fascinating if they brought Peyton Thorne in to be the hero after what he did to Arkansas last year.
It would be funny. And also it is worth noting he faced 0 adversity last week, which is one, he played well. So like credit to him. Like it's not like a knock on him, but they weren't forced to think about that at all last week of like, oh man, like, are we sure this kid can handle it? Like what's going on? They didn't have to have any of those conversations, and he didn't have to have any of those conversations within himself of, oh man, I'm really struggling out here. Can I get the job done? Because it was pretty much smooth sailing from the outset. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he holds up in this environment. And like you said, how their confidence in him holds up. And I talked about this last week when it happened, but because Monday after the 4 interception game from Thorne, Hugh Freeze was like talking him up like he's like, oh, there's no way we'd make a quarterback change. We love this guy. And then all of a sudden Friday, it's like, oh, actually, we're going to start the other guy. So that does make me kind of wonder, like, is there a part of Hugh Freeze that's like, man, the experienced guy, like this is my guy, I should be riding with him. I'm assuming not as much since he went with Hank Brown and it went pretty well last week. But I, as is the case with any of these quarterbacks, you're one bad quarter away from the fan base turning on you. And so, I think that's very much worth noting. And I'm glad you planted that little seed.
Yeah, there we go. Had to. We cover all our bases here at Inside Arkansas. So, oh man. Anything else? You have any other bold predictions? Anything else about this game you just feel like you need to get off your chest?
I don't feel super strongly about like certain things. Like, I'm going to pick a winner later today, which fans will see on InsideArkansas.com. I don't feel super great about that. Like there's certain things in this matchup that I'm intrigued by, but nothing that I'm like really ready. Like I would be doing the bold predictions section a disservice if I just threw up bold predictions and was like, I think they'll have 4 picks or, like just something random. So I don't want to like commit to anything too crazy, but I feel like we did a good job kind of breaking down the matchup and at least how we view it. I'll just be honest with you, but like if you can humor me for just a second, Curtis. So we talked about a lot of matchups and what Arkansas kind of needs to do. Let's talk about which ones of those do we actually think they're going to win? Like, do we actually think Arkansas's D line is going to win that matchup against the Auburn O line?
Not particularly.
No, like I don't think Auburn's offensive line is like really good. You know,
Yeah.
like I think they on paper like they seem to be just about fine. So I don't think they're going to get like dumb. They're not going to be moving Arkansas off the ball and like just shoving it down their throats. But I mean, we both kind of called it there that we don't think the D line is necessarily going to be the reason for the pass rush getting home. But Arkansas's O line, do you feel like they're like, do you feel like Arkansas is going to be able to run the ball? I guess that's really the big question. I'm going to dumb it down to: will Arkansas be able to run the ball?
I think they're going to be able to establish the run. Yes. I don't think they'll get it. I don't think they're going to have a ton of chunk plays. And like you said, I don't think they're going to rush for 250 or something like that. But I think they're going to be able to establish the run, sustain some drives, keep the chains moving. So yeah, I think it'll be effective.
I just wonder if Talon can come out and hit a couple throws early.
Be huge.
Because I think Auburn's, if you look at Auburn's defense, like, and on PFF, if you look at their top graded players, like 9 of their top 10 defensive players are in the front 7. Like it's all their best players are up front. And so I do think there's like a path to if Talon isn't able to get things going early and they're able to just load the box and dare them to beat them. Like I could see Arkansas really struggling in that setting, but I could also see Talon just coming out and like hitting a big shot to start the game and kind of opening things up. And then you get them on their back foot. So I'm fascinating, man. I can't wait to see how this plays out. I'm tired of talking about it. But I do think Arkansas's offensive line is like going to be able to kind of like you said, like control the game enough. Like they're not going to be gashing them, but I do think they're going to be able to play keep away a little bit here and there, grind out some first downs. And I think they'll have a good chance to win if Talon is just like 80% of the guy we saw at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I expect this to be a really close game, a close and competitive game, a 1-score game, which is interesting given the recent history in this series, because that just hasn't been the case since Spikegate a few years ago. Every one of them has been blowouts, right?
Yeah, 21 was. I mean, 21. I wouldn't say it was a blowout, but it was not it was pretty comfortable win.
It'd be like 15 or 16. Yeah,
at
Arkansas.
2022 was safely, I would say, like a blowout. I was 42-20 or 45-20 or something like
Brian
that.
Harson's career.
I think Rocket had like 200 yards in that game.
Yeah. Then last year, we're not going to speak on.
Last year was the blowout of all blowouts.
48-10 was deceiving for all the wrong reasons. That could have been even worse, man.
That was when we realized, you know what? Kenny Guyton's not going to end up being the
OC. Yeah, maybe this isn't going to work out. Right. Yeah, somebody called Bobby P. And all the people who were saying it at the time, we were like, ha, ha, funny. And here he is. So
turns out, yeah.
All right, man. Well, no, it's good stuff, Andrew. Let's get out of here because we got, I don't know, a couple hours, and then we're going to go live and talk about all this all over again, except different things. At least John's good about that. He's like, hey, what do you guys talk about on Pie That Nature? That way, we're not double dipping too much. We're aware of that, so we try not to do it. But no, appreciate everybody for tuning in. Do all the things. Make sure you get subscribed. YouTube channel, Inside Arkansas, the Pot of That Nature podcast feeds, Apple, Spotify, wherever you tune into your podcast. Do that. We appreciate you guys, and we will be back like we always do after the game to run it back from all these things we just talked about with our accountability session. If we were right, we're going to pat ourselves on the back. If we're wrong, we're men enough to admit it. So for Andrew Ellis, it's been Curtis Wilkerson with Inside Arkansas. It's been the Pot of That Nature pregame show, and we will see you guys soon.